more and more content is going to be consumed of the cloud, with cloud becoming the natural warehouse, offering personal digital lockers to people. The heart is going to move on to the cloud. There are a lot of small and medium scale companies which can't afford to invest in IT infrastructure in order to cope up with their business needs. So cloud is giving them a huge benefit in terms of scaling up the infrastructure without worrying about the investment part. It also gives us huge amount of flexibility and scalability to add up the network and hardware resources at a short notice of time. With the responsiveness becoming the new mantra for software producers, I think they will increasingly seek means that give them the speed and flexibility to produce and deploy applications. This will mean the software producers will increasingly adopt cloud infrastructure for their activities. So you can see how some of these drivers are causing and fueling the growth of cloud adoption. And there are clear opportunities. Today I can have my test lab on the cloud. I can choose and have the right mix of having a premise-based infrastructure, which is a part of my organization, or an infrastructure on the cloud. I can have more and more platforms with availability testing on the cloud, with basic operating system, browser, and other mandatory software available as virtual machines. It is going to give me a huge amount of cost reduction and ease in management. We can use this to generate more revenue. If we have excess capacity available, we can share the resources. The multi-tenancy is going to allow us to have more efficient utilization of resources. We don't need to invest anymore in software licenses, and we can use the facilities available on the cloud. The desktop computing is going to be under tremendous threat with focus on online computing, and browser is going to be the new desktop. It would be enough to say here that big companies like Google and Microsoft and Apple have launched the cloud services, and these three companies are betting heavily on browser being the new desktop. And as I said before, the heart is moving on the cloud with the flexibility to be given to individuals that they can access their content anywhere through any device, whether it's an iPad or a smartphone or a PC. If the data is available on the cloud, they don't need to worry. I would like to take an example of a device which you might have heard about called Kindle. It's an e-reader device. Now, the device is independent of the reader application. There is a Kindle Reader client available for iPad, for smartphones, for PCs. So you can, if you're reading a book on Kindle and you bookmarked it on your smartphone, tomorrow if you try and read it on your iPad, you'll be able to start from there. So that is the kind of power cloud is giving to people to access content from anywhere, any device, at any point in time, and they don't need to worry where the content is lying or how the content is being given to them. So having seen some of these disruptions now and their impact and how they are affecting our testing services model and the way it is being implemented currently, we will now try and see what lies ahead, the road ahead in terms of what are the new things coming up on the horizon in terms of the emerging models. But let's try and understand how do we need to give up the assumptions of the past and why will they not work any longer in the current context. Let's look at the assumption of the independent assessment. With more and more agile adoption, independent assessment will be losing its value. It is shifting to collaboration and co-location now as the last line of defense, as a safety net. Not anymore. We are required to rather drive development now. It's a complete 360-degree reversal on that front. We are in the driver's seat now. We are driving requirements. We are not a gatekeeper anymore. There are organizations that were projecting and managing a one-stop shop to offer all services to the customers as a test supermarket. May not be viable anymore. We may have to move towards specialization. Despite tremendous value-added services being given by testing service companies to its customers, cost, I would say, still remain a key driver for test outsourcing decisions. But with the role of testers and testing community changing, with new skills and with the driver of development and driver of requirements, I'm sure we will have a lot of opportunities to move the value chain, and we must exploit this opportunity. The sequential nature and the ease of plug and play, focus on meeting expectations, specifications, is no longer going to be valid. We are going to be currently focusing now on building it right from the day one and delivering the desired value to the customer. So we'll try and see now how, with these assumptions and concepts being put behind us, how does the emerging model or the emerging service models, business models look in terms of the capabilities we need to have, in terms of the collaboration structure we need to have, in terms of the capacity we need to have for managing our infrastructure to be able to offer our services in a much more structured way for the future. And last but not the least, we'll try and see how we are going to manage this change and its pace. Before I move on to the capability part, let me take another example here. I'm sure you all know that India and Pakistan, the two Asian hockey giants, were the world champions till 1980s. Later, the downfall started. Why? As it started becoming more a game of stamina and power than the skill alone, and they are still difficult to find the retain the position. So the picture I'm trying to paint here, friends, is that similarly, the way the disruptions are causing unprecedented and unparalleled changes in the way IT landscape is shaping up, the context is changing completely for us as well, and we need to really wake up to the occasion. We need to rise to the occasion. The context has changed. So we have little past experience of the challenges, whether it's mobile, whether it's cloud, whether it's agile adoption. They are pretty recent phenomena. We have no past reference to learn from or to build upon. We have to just look around us and see what's happening and just get on with the knowledge part on these fronts. And learning time is also shrinking from weeks to days. Traditional models allowed us to have enough learning time because they were sequential in nature. There was time when we could jot down the requirements and make our test plans and test cases and then move on to testing, and we have enough time to learn about the product, about the business, about the requirements. Not anymore. With Agile, everything has to be done within 3 to 4 weeks time, and it is happening. People are wanting faster releases. People are wanting to be more competitive to give faster releases to market. So we have little learning time left, and the complexity is just building up in terms of multiple operating systems. Gone are the days when we just had 3 operating systems and limited hardware. Now we have multiple variants of mobile devices. We have multiple operating systems, and the software explosion is just booming up. So the context is pretty complex. We're not having the same perspective anymore. So we need to be alive. We need to be clear about how the future is shaping up. And even the role is changing. We are not, as I said earlier, we're not a gatekeeper anymore. We are more of a facilitator. Rather, we are the driver. We are the custodian of the requirements. We are giving inputs to development. We are helping convert business requirements to engineering requirements so the development team can start their work. Independent is not separate anymore. I want to emphasize on this point as we talk about the independent nature of the software testing in our threat and opportunity side. So while we may still retain the independent status, it doesn't mean separate. It means working closely in collaboration with development teams to deliver value to the customer. We are not going to be tasked anymore. We will have to have a self-organizing, self-disciplining role to be able to understand the requirements, to be able to help the customer, to be able to help the development teams produce and deliver value to the customer. So you see, the role is changing completely. Okay, it is putting us in the driver's seat now, rather than just waiting for the builds to come as in our current context, where we wait for the development team to hand over the builds and then we start testing. We need to be more proactive now. And it is bringing huge opportunity in terms of learning new skills. We need to add to the basket. Okay? We need to learn how we can deploy applications on cloud, how we can deploy virtual environments on the cloud, how and when to use emulators versus physical hardware in the context of mobile devices. We need to understand the business analysis skills to be able to help customers understand their end users and write better user stories. The domain and business knowledge in the traditional model was a bonus. We had enough time to learn about it and know about it. But with the faster implementation of Agile and Agile picking up, we'll have little time to learn, as we saw. So the domain and business knowledge is going to be a prerequisite now. The most important thing we need to understand here is that we were developing a lot of skills in terms of our automation tools based on GUI-based tools or user actions. And we're capturing them and doing a lot of functional automation of our testing. Now, with more and more software services-oriented architecture being used, there are a lot of web services talking to programs and talking to each other. So we will also need to ensure, the testing will also need to ensure that even these software actions are emulated and they are working fine and they are giving right results. And as I say this, I think while we have a lot of excitement building up in terms of the value and the new skills to be learned, I think it is becoming a bit difficult for us to be remaining in that comfort zone. And why I'm saying so, because the testing community traditionally were not supposed to be adept at programming skills. We were more inclined towards the black box approach. Black box is going to lose its value over a period of time. It will be required to understand why things are not working rather than just reporting the expected behavior and the actual results. We are going to be having knowledge of development frameworks because we are going to be reviewing the unit test cases which developers are making in an agile environment, in a test-driven development environment. And we are going to be having solution engineering skills where we are helping the engineering requirements from the business requirements to the development teams. We need to understand Agile and Scrum as a practice. So all this is putting up a huge amount of pressure in terms of our skills. And the challenge for the testing service providers and testing service companies is that how will we get this kind of skills within our organization, and how will we scale up our team to have all these skills as the future unfolds in front of us. But I must tell you that this is how the future is going to unfold, and the line between the developer and the tester is going to become thin and thin over a period of time. We are supposed to having all these skills now. And I thought I'll share a few examples with you from my personal experience of meeting and talking to testing professionals in the industry. And these examples might help you get a flavor of how the basket is changing in terms of our skills. You would notice the configuration of testing team now includes skilled engineers, architects, and project managers. So the testing teams are not only helping the customers verify the product, they are actively participating in development and becoming the experts in making sure that the product is built right. And let's look at another example where the testing team is taking on the complete responsibility of preparing the test bed by deploying the application, setting up all the databases and the servers. So the complete deployment and setting up the application before it is tested and before it is released further. And these skills and these practices will become fairly common within testing community, and we will need to acquire these skills and know-how to be able to grow and have success in the future. Now let's move on to the next aspect of how will the collaboration models evolve with these changes and unfolding in the future. As we have already noticed that with the change in the role of testing teams and the way Agile is getting in focus, we will need to have a very high collaboration and teamwork with the development team and work intensely with them to deliver value and drive the requirements in fact. So all this will lead us to a situation where we will need to be working very closely and almost working side by side with the development team. Now this puts a challenge in terms of testing outsourcing services. In case our customers are away, miles away, and we are sitting here and we are trying to offer our services to our customers. So they are following the Agile methodology and they are wanting the testing services to be outsourced, or we are wanting to offer our services to them. So how will this happen? The first most obvious thing is that our team members can go and embed with their teams, and we can have a pure co-location based model. But I'm not sure whether the costs and the investments will allow that to happen. So we need to look at alternatives, okay? And here I have tried to suggest a few alternatives in terms of hybrid co-location models, okay? So let us understand how some of these things might emerge in future in terms of mixed co-location or a hybrid co-location model. So there could be activities which are not core to the Scrum team, and there could be value in pre-sprint or pre-release testing activities which are not core to the Scrum development or not core to the Agile development, but can be taken out from that core activity. So those kind of things can definitely be given to the offshore teams. Then there could be another situation where our teams or testing service providers teams are initially co-located with shorter sprint cycles, 2 to 3 week cycles, to sort of understand what are the issues which are coming up, and we can iron out those issues faster. I would like to mention here that you must be wondering that even in traditional models there was collaboration, communication required. The context trends has changed in the sense that whereas in traditional models the collaboration was important probably in the beginning when we were having intense communication and collaboration with the customer to understand the requirements, to understand the product, to understand the business, to help in planning and all. And then after that phase was over, we were fairly independent in terms of doing our own testing and then sharing the results. But now the emerging models of collaboration will require a continuous collaboration and working together to produce the desired result. We will have to work day in and day out with development teams to ensure that we are on the same page day to day on what's happening in terms of, otherwise we'll not be able to meet the objectives of the sprint or the release cycles. So let's move on to the other option in the hybrid co-location models, that being of a test Scrum Master. I'm sure most of you and some of you might have heard about what a Scrum Master is. The Scrum Master's key role is to facilitate agile development and agile implementation in organization, to put it very simply. And then there are a lot of times when there are teams distributed, even the Scrum team is distributed. So there is a concept of Scrum of Scrums. Some of you may have heard about it. And there is a Scrum Master which is facilitating and coordinating and moderating between these two Scrum teams to iron out if there are any challenges, to resolve any team issues, any blocks, any dependencies because of which the Agile teams or the Scrum teams may not be able to achieve the objectives. Similarly, for our outsourcing testing activities, when the development is happening onshore and testing is happening offshore, we can have a concept of a test Scrum Master, where the test Scrum Master is doing two things. One, it is facilitating like a Scrum Master the internal teams in terms of their impediments, in terms of infrastructure or any resources which they need internally, and also in terms of facilitating and ironing out any issues which have the development teams which are offshore. So this can facilitate a more collaborative effort. And there are a concept like pseudo co-location, where both the teams can work and travel to each other's location for some time to build that cultural know-how with each other, to build a comfort level understanding with each other, and then work independently probably to produce the desired output. And then there is an obvious thing that part of the team can be embedded with the customer team and part can be working offshore, where they are updating themselves day to day and taking on the activities accordingly. So I've tried to share my thoughts on how some of the models may emerge and how some of these things may be helpful to the testing service organizations in order to be able to service the agile methodologies and customers who are supporting agile development, and still they are able to outsource testing services to us. But we'll have to have some considerations as well. We'll have to keep two things in mind as these models emerge. And there are certain questions we need to answer and we need to have better understanding of. For example, how will we maintain a continuous transfer of knowledge without co-location, and specifically in Agile, where it focuses more on working software and interactions than on processes. So it's going to be a challenge. How the knowledge base is going to be built up, how the knowledge base is going to be transferred between the two teams. These kind of questions will have to get answered. How are we going to manage flexibilities of scale? How are the contracts for the embedded teams, whether it's initial co-location or pure co-location model, are going to be managed? How do we motivate and support the embedded teams when they are cut off from the base organization? How do we manage the regular attrition and rotation of teams? There could be legal and political challenges to the onshore outsourcing, as embedded teams will imply. And last but not the least, we'll have to ensure that our cloud test infrastructure support the collaboration model with distributed teams. This is going to be fairly important if we are going to be helping our partners meet their testing services objectives. Let's try and see how we can leverage the test infrastructure part also as some of these models emerge. You would have noticed by now that the hardware and software growth is intimidating in the current scenario, with factors like multiple platforms and exploding consumption of software. So most of the organizations are already under pressure to keep the software and the knowledge updated in terms of hardware and software. And with new mobile devices, with multiple operating systems, the pressure is just building up. So how do we sort of cope under this pressure and of investments versus knowledge? And how do we still leverage our existing infrastructure and the facilities which we have to be able to offer a viable offering to our customers? So one of the obvious things which we have discussed before as well is moving from a capital expenditure that is rather than having an investment in-house to build infrastructure, we can move to cloud, and there we just need to pay per use basis. And so it will become a capital expenditure will move to operational expenditure. You would have noticed that most of the software companies, development companies, are normally factored around or grouped around domains. Somebody is serving the BFSI domain, somebody is grouped around the mobile domain, somebody is telecom domain. So even we as testing service companies as well and testing service providers as well will need to move toward area of specialization, and probably, for example, we may become a mobile testing company because there will be enough volumes and enough work for us to do in that area, and we can survive and grow in that. And then if we can couple that with the relevant infrastructure, because then we can make our investments, our knowledge base, our offering in such a way that it can have a multiplier effect on our offering. So collaboration capability mixed with the capacity will make a wonderful offering, will make a brilliant offering to our customers as well. We might have a portfolio approach to manage our capacity and infrastructure. For example, we may synchronize the growth of our infrastructure and capacity based on the business we are associated with, the logical segment, whether we are in telecom, whether we are in some financial domain. So we can keep the trends in that and follow the business and make our infrastructure decisions accordingly. There may be a lot of opportunities in future. In fact, that might make sense to share or co-own with our customers or with a fellow service provider. Traditionally, the testing infrastructure was a given in the current context, and the infrastructure calls for distributed over a customer base. But now, I think with the changing context, with the test infrastructure becoming more and more precious and more important, we will need to really look at the return on investment which we are making on our test infrastructure, and we need to monitor this very carefully. And last but not the least, how are we going to manage the change? So the key message here is, especially for us as justice providers, some of these changes are so fundamental that they will not happen on its own without a top-down commitment and approach. Let's take an example of Scrum principles, whether it's whole team approach or self-organizing. They're not that intuitive or natural to learn or implement. It needs a complete cultural shift in the way we are doing things, in our management style. Self-organizing has to replace the command and control managerial style. While we may be learning the skills and we might be learning practices, we must understand that, and we may be adopting processes, we must understand that this change is not a process change. It's not just a technical challenge alone. It cannot be solved by just training and doing capability development. And the past may not have any reference to future. So it's a complete cultural shift. We will have to lead it from front. We will have to create a climate of trust with our teams. we'll have to walk the talk actually. So by just doing agile, by following agile practices, we may not be able to bring about this change. It's a complete mindset change which we are looking at and talking about today. And obviously we will have to back this change with investments in training and development, improving the capability and skills of our teams. We might need to look at hiring to add capability to the existing knowledge base. And yes, we will have to make relevant investments in infrastructure as well. So we'll have to find the right mix between the cloud and premise infrastructure. How much can we leave with premise-based infrastructure? How much we can leave with the cloud-based infrastructure? So we'll have to do these kind of things. And training and development will have to be kept in focus in terms of how technology trends are emerging, which are the things which are becoming redundant in terms of our knowledge. So actively retiring those old parts and creating new knowledge opportunities for our teams. We'll have to do all those kind of activities, but it has to be coming from top down. It is not going to be from bottom up. That's the key message I'm trying to give here. So that was all I wanted to speak to you about today in terms of what are the disruptions, how are disruptions causing some of the future models in terms of the collaboration aspect, in terms of the managing the test infrastructure aspect, in managing the capability and skills and roles aspect. And I hope you have been able to get a good idea of the situation, how it is building up, and how do we need to prepare ourselves for the future. I put on the list of references also. Probably you can look at some of the references when you get a copy of this presentation, and you might get more benefit from this. So with this, I would like to thank all of you for your time again, and thanks Terry. And in case you have any questions from me, I can take it now. Okay, so there is a question by Vittal Sangale. What is the difference between agile and incremental model? Vittal, there is principally no difference. Agile nurtures incremental model. Agile is incremental in nature. Agile is both iterative and incremental in nature. So there is no difference actually. How to do load testing? There's a question by Vishal. Go ahead. How to test for SQL injection? Vishal, I'm sorry. The context of today's discussion was to give you an insight into how some of the disruptions in technology landscape and IT landscape are shaping our services and how to prepare for the future. So I would not like to go into the details of these questions now. There are a lot of other sources available on the internet where you can learn from this, and I would suggest you put those resources. So can you please detail Scrum Master? Okay, as I said, Scrum Master is a concept in Agile where the individual or the person is helping the development teams and the Agile teams implement the Scrum methodology, whether it's the sprint cycle, whether it's the sprint planning, or whatever, or removing the bottlenecks and moving the. His main role, his or her main role, is that of facilitator, is that of a helper to help Agile teams achieve their objective. He may be a part of the Agile team itself. So a lot of times, sometimes even a quality team member can be playing that role part-time. So in a week, there are, if he has around 40 hours of work, so probably 6 hours is contributing as Scrum Master. I hope I've been able to answer the question, Mohanraj. So Jitendra asked another question. What about testing metrics in Agile? Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so there are a lot of metrics, and depends on your particular organization and development teams which they follow. But there are some of the common ones are like code coverage and cyclomatic complexity. You need to understand how the code is being written and how unit test cases are being written, whether they are having proper coverage requirements or not. So you can look at these kind of metrics. Any more questions? So there is a question from Ajay. How can a black box tester service in an agile environment? What extra things he has to learn? So that's a very good question, Ajay. As I said in my slides earlier, that you will have to acquire a lot of new skills, and the key thing being that you will have to acquire now programming skills, and you will understand how different frameworks like JUnit and NUnit work. So you will have to shed your black box role, and to be able to work in agile environment, you need to understand what test-driven development means, how test-driven development happens. You need to understand things like what is a continuous integration server and how are the builds tested through that. So you will have to move in that direction. Which model is more cost effective? That's a good question, but unfortunately, because I think, see, I'm not operating model, and nobody suggests that you should follow agile or waterfall. It's just the nature of software development and the needs of the market and the business that agile is getting more and more popular. So if you're happy with waterfall, if you're having no problems and your requirements don't change, and you can have all the requirements upfront, and you're able to meet all your product requirements in time, and customers are happy, so there's no need to move to agile. As a security concern, Mohan Raj asked another question. As a security concern, whether agile is secure? Uh, uh, I didn't understand this. So in what context are you asking, Mohan? Can you please rephrase this question? What exactly do you mean here by security concern? Namanita Bhattacharya asks a question. I want to shift to IT industry in the domain of software testing from teaching. How can I do that? I have 5 to 6 years experience of teaching. You will have to first of all understand that why do you want to move to software testing, okay, and what are your own strengths. So I've tried to put a picture of what a software tester's role and in terms of skills and expectations is going to have. So you need to assess your own strengths first of all, I would say, and whether you will be able to grow in this field or not. I would appreciate if you can do that, then probably proceed accordingly. So yeah, Jitendra asked another very good question. In Agile, if one test resource leaves organization, then it is more harm to the team as knowledge is gone, and replenishment of this knowledge is difficult. But in Waterfall, a lot of documents are written for creating system as tester is independent. What is your view? So yeah, that's a very valid point and good question, and there's a lot of debate around this. But here I would like to uh, mention that agile doesn't mean that there is no documentation. I think that's a common misconception. So agile means how can we service the changing requirements. Okay, that doesn't mean that we don't have any documents at all. Yeah, it is difficult because knowledge is embedded in teams uh, in an agile environment, and all the knowledge may not be available in the documents. So yes, you will have to ensure that the key knowledge part at least is documented and available as reference. But yeah, it is a very valid point that these things do pose challenge in agile, and people are really struggling to understand all the answers on the situation. Ashish Raut asks the question, who have more chances to grow in terms of profile as well as money? Okay, quality analyst or a test engineer? Uh, I'm sorry, Ashish, I don't think I can answer this question because I think I will leave that to you to decide. Jitinder asked another question, what are the prospective industries for software test outsourcing companies wherein they can get good business in coming years? Jitinder, it depends on the domain. As I said in my presentation that the side. So whether you want to service the telecom domain, whether you want to service the mobile domain, or whether you want to service the financial services domain, that decision you will have to take based on your strengths and organization capabilities. But there is a huge amount of prospect in all industries, and you will need to take a decision based on your strengths and your aspirations as an organization where you want to grow in this domain. Ajay asks question, how a senior tester can move in management side in agile environment. There is a threat for a tester in agile environment to move in management side. I think Ajay, you will first need to understand two aspects here. That when you say management side, are you talking about a facilitating side where you can help other testers to grow, or you are talking about command and control style, which I said has to go away in agile, because in an agile team the basic tenet is that software teams and the teams working within Scrum are self-accountable, self-disciplined. So they don't need a management from outside. They just need a facilitation from outside. They just need help from outside to help them remove any dependencies, any impediments in achieving the objectives. So it depends what do you mean by management. So if you mean that you will be able to facilitate and play a role of a helper or facilitator, then yes, there is no threat. But if you want to move as a manager, which is task oriented, which believes in telling things to people and helping them from that point of view, may not have much role in an agile environment. Sheetal asks a question, mobile applications are generally small, so people are giving to check for testing. If yes, then majority for device compatibility checking only. Yeah, probably you're right, Sheetal, but that is not the only thing which applications are tested for device compatibility. They will also go through normal functional testing, performance testing, and compatibility testing as well. Small doesn't make a difference. In mobile applications, since revenue is an important thing, that is true for all software being produced. They have to have a business revenue stream attached to it. But it becomes all the more important in mobile applications. So it doesn't affect whether the application is small or large. It will have to go through all kinds of testing. Because when you are using it as a user, you don't want to have any performance issues or any other issues with the application. As I said, Sheetal, I would restrict my conversation here to. So you are asking the question, what are the tools you are using for mobile application testing? So there are a lot of tools, but I don't think this question falls in the context or purview of today's discussion. So it depends on what kind of applications you are using, what kind of infrastructure you have. So there are a lot of tools. There are open source tools. There are normal HP's QTP tool. There are a lot of tools. Ankur asked a question, can we move from developer to tester or vice versa? Ankur, in fact, this is going to happen. There is going to be a lot of cross-pollination as Agile grows and gets more and more adoption. As I mentioned, we're going to have a cross-functional teams, and the line between the developer and tester is going to be thinning. So while testers will remain and retain their independent status in the team, I think they will have to have a lot of developer skills. Similarly, developers will have to do a lot of unit testing, so they will need to understand how unit test cases are written, how the automation happens. So, yeah, there is going to be a lot of to-and-fro movement from these two communities to each other. That will make more sense actually in the future.
Okay, so we'll wait for some more time. Soon, any questions we have?
Okay, I think if you have no more questions, then thanks, Surinder, and I would like to thank all of you for sparing your valuable time. And I hope, as I said in the beginning, this was beneficial and helpful to you in your work. And all the best, I would say. It's an exciting time ahead for us as a testing services community. So let's try and make the maximum of it and exploit the potential we have in our hands. All the best once again, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Vikas, for your informative session on test outsourcing business, emerging trends in sales of disruptive and unprecedented changes. It was indeed an enlightening session. I would also like to thank our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of this webinar will be made available on techgeek.com by tomorrow. The next session in TechGeek webinar series is happening tomorrow, that is Saturday, 25th Feb at 3 p.m. Topic for the webinar is hands-on PHP and database connection to create dynamic pages. We'll be having Ms. Mughal Rehana Muzago, Technology at Andersoft Consulting Private Limited as our guest speaker. So see you all tomorrow at 3 p.m. Have a nice day.